Welcome into the latest edition and the new season of Think Deeper from Focus Press. I'm your host, Jack Wilkie. I have to apologize. It's been quite a layoff since our last episode. We've had a lot of irons in the fire. We've gotten a couple of teenage devotional books produced in the meantime. We've had a lot of other things going on, but the podcast is something that I've always wanted to emphasize, wanted to make sure that we were getting done, and so as I mentioned, this isn't just a new episode, it is a new season. So rather than just being this one, and hopefully we'll get around to one next week, we actually have some shows lined up all through the summer. We've got some of our regulars. Brad Harrop, of course, will be on to talk about some varying issues in different episodes. Joe Wilkie, who's been a regular guest, will be on a couple of times as well. But we've got other guests, those that have written books or those that maybe have an expertise in certain areas. Some really interesting stuff that I'm really excited about. We've got some Bible study stuff, an episode on leadership and what it means to be a biblical leader. We've got one lined up to talk about angels, demons, kind of the supernatural realm parts of the Bible, the spiritual realm, or whatever you want to call that. And so just all kinds of topics that we've got lined up over the next few months. And so I'm very excited to get back into it. Very excited to be doing the podcast regularly again. Hopefully you've subscribed. Hopefully you'll tune in each week and tell your friends about it. Let us know, or let them know Think Deeper is the place to go for good biblical discussion and hopefully some good insights that help you with your walk and help you understand God and His Word better. This first week, I'm just going to go solo. I'm going to talk about something that kind of came up as a controversy over the last month or two that I think needed a bit of a deeper dive. It was started with an article I wrote last year at the start of, I guess, everything that went on surrounding COVID, about churches canceling and Hebrews 10:25 and Forsaking the Assembly and those questions there, and came to the conclusion that no, we're not forsaking the assembly by virtual meeting, by closing our buildings for a few months or whatever else, and doing in-home worship. And then I wrote something a month or two ago from a perspective on this side of everything that said, well, actually, I think I was wrong to say that. I think that there was more to it than that, and that it really did not help or really wasn't the right move to go without meeting. I know every congregation did it differently. I know some went the whole time, some took off for a week or two, or maybe a month or two. Some didn't gather all through the summer and into the fall, and maybe still not even. I know things have varied greatly region by region. I know the response to the COVID cases and deaths and all that have varied greatly across the country as well, and so that has dictated a number of things. The government regulations have varied in those areas as well, and so it's not a one-size-fits-all discussion, but the question of Hebrews 10:25, the question of shutting down for a while, the question of all these different elements that come into play, was really my focus in writing the articles that I did. And so I want to talk about Hebrews 10:25 and a proper understanding of what is said there. Usually it's trotted out as kind of the proof text of why you need to be in church every single Sunday. And that's not a bad interpretation of it, but it's also a little bit simplistic. I think that when we really get into the meat of what's being said there, it goes beyond just a box to be checked off of going and saying you did it, and that's that we have to do that, and if we're not doing that, then we're not checking off all the right boxes, and if we don't check off all the right boxes, we go to hell when we die. That's not the view of Christianity I think that the Bible gives us. That's not the view that we want to perpetuate. we want an understanding of we do things out of faith, we do things out of love for God, we do things out of joy and appreciation, gratitude, and excitement to do His will, rather than, okay, I got to do this or else I'm not saved. We grow into those things, and so that's part of why what Hebrews 10:25 helps us understand better. It's not just go be there every Sunday or else. I'm going to read the section. I prefer New American Standard, so that's the version this will be in. It's coming off the heels of so much doctrinal discussion in Hebrews of Jesus and His sacrifice and everything that He means as better than everything the old law had given. And so because we have the confidence, because He's done all of these things for us, it says in Hebrews 10:22, let us draw near with a sincere heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for He who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So there's these let us statements here. Let us draw near because Jesus has made this possible for us as our high priest. In verse 23, let us hold fast the confession that we have. As the writer of Hebrews was writing to people whose faith maybe was wavering, he says, let's not do that. Let's hang on to this truth that we've gotten because of Jesus. And then the third, let us there. Let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. This is a call back to Hebrews chapter 3, where he says, don't let any of you be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. Don't let anybody be pulled away like the Israelites in the desert were by a lack of faith or any of these things, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it's still called today. And so when he says, let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, it's I've got to hold fast so I don't fall away, and I've got to help you, and you've got to help me. We've got to have this mindset of encouraging and building each other up so that we all stay close to God, so that none of us fall away, so that none of us drift from the church and from the truth and from God and our salvation. And then that brings us to verse 25, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. If you'll notice, verse 25 is not a complete sentence. It's not a standalone thing that says, don't forsake the assembly, or thou shalt not forsake the assembly. It's a continuation. It starts with not forsaking our own assembling. That's a contrast. It's saying, do this instead of that. And so what the thing we're supposed to do is to consider how to love, stimulate one another to love and good deeds. That's why we don't forsake the assembling. That's why we don't get out of the habit and turn our backs on our Christian family and abandon the habit of getting together, as he says, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And so it's sandwiched between those two things. And so if we just view it as a box to check off of, okay, I didn't forsake the assembly, I went, well, that misses the larger point here. And so the reason we assemble in this particular context, it's not the only reason, it's not the only thing the Bible gives us to do on Sunday, but the reason we come together in this particular context is for one another, considering how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, encouraging one another. And so why do we not forsake this habit? Why do we not forsake this gathering? Because we need to be there for each other. We need to be there to help each other, to encourage each other, to bear each other's burdens, to see where each other is struggling, to confess our sins to one another and hear that confession and pray for one another. And all of these one another commandments are why we have to come together. These are commandments. These are things that Christians are supposed to do. If the Sunday event was just going through elements, if it was just saying, I checked my attendance box off, I checked my hearing a sermon box off, I checked my singing box off, I checked my Lord's Supper box off, all of the things that we go through, then yeah, doing it all separate in homes looking at a computer screen or a cell phone screen, sure, that works. If we understand biblically what's being said here, though, we cannot literally do what Hebrews 10:25 is telling us to do without a one another. The one another is the catalyst for why we gather together according to this verse and in this specific context. That's why, notice it says, not forsaking our own assembling together. We always use shorthand. We say not forsaking the assembly. The assembly, B-L-Y, is an event. That's not what it says. Not forsaking our own assembling together. That is the habit of getting together with fellow Christians. That is a habit we cannot forsake. Not an event that we're supposed to do and check off and say we did, but a habit of being around each other for the purpose of spiritually building each other up. That was the point I was getting at in the article, is that if you take that definition of what's being said here, of really what Hebrews 10:25 is saying, that this is a habit to be in for the purpose of building one another up, then absolutely we did not fulfill this commandment. We did not fulfill be hospitable to one another. We did not fulfill serve one another, and all of these things that require us being together. That should give us some pause. That should make us think about a few things. And I think that's really leads to the bigger discussion, which, if you're familiar with me and my writing, you know this is a big emphasis of mine, and that's what I wrote my book Church Reset about, is we need a bigger picture of church. With a very small picture of church, which is come together on Sunday, get your lesson, go home and live out your Christianity and carry on your individual battle, then sure, the virtual thing makes sense. With a biblical, bigger picture of church, which is the interconnectedness, the body where every part of the body has a role to play, and the priesthood of all believers, and all of these biblical concepts, then the idea of one guy talking to everybody separately in their separate homes isn't that. And so, while the direct discussion here doesn't really apply much anymore, or at least I hope not in most cases, as churches have started to come back together, as we're not where we were a year ago, it's the indirect discussion, the underlying discussion about how we view church and the things we do as a church and how we view the Sunday gathering and all those things tells us how we're going to interpret these things. All of the elements of worship are communal. It's singing to one another, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. That it's something we do back and forth to each other. That the songs we're singing are praise to God, but also reminders to the people around us of the things that we're saying, the words we're saying, the promises of God, and the beauty of God, and the character, and the promises of God's word. All of the things we sing about, we're singing to each other too, and we have to remember that. Prayer is something we're doing together. It's, we all should have our individual prayer lives, but there's power in communal prayer. We see that throughout the book of Acts. We see that, it's really important that we pray together. It's not an individual thing. The Lord's Supper, it's often called communion because we're communing with God and with each other. It is our family meal. It is our remembrance. It is something, and that's why, some of the ways that we do it, which is you are passed bread, you crack some off, you pass a little cup and you take a sip of it and then you pass it on and put your head down and have a moment by yourself, really isn't the biblical idea either. Again, it's a communal thing. It is sharing. It's not a whole lot unlike Thanksgiving. You're getting together with your family to remember what you have to be thankful for and to enjoy a feast. And our feast is so directly connected to that because it is the body and blood that we're being thankful for, is what we're gathering around. And so it's not an individual pursuit. Along with the study and the teaching that we receive, it's not just something for a bunch of individuals to take in and do with what they will, but that we're supposed to encourage each other. We're supposed to be training, and the weak being trained by the strong, and growing and being fed, and all those things so they can feed others. And all of these things require all of us together. And so it's our view of church that really, this whole thing has been a litmus test for what we believe church to be, what we believe the Sunday event to be, what we believe God's picture and plan for church is. Is it a bunch of individuals going through motions together, or is it all of us, sharing in all of these things that we do? On top of it all, this is where I can get in trouble. There's 2 points I want to make. I'll start with the less spicy, I guess, of the two. When we talk about these one another commandments, when we talk about the importance of assembling together, not just assembly, but assembling together for the purpose of encouraging and building one another up, and bearing one another's burdens, be hospitable to each other, all of these other things, the burden of proof is on those that would say it's okay to not do that, and to stop doing that, and to postpone that indefinitely. You got to prove why and when, or why it's okay to do that, and for how long. Where do we have the idea, the authorization to say, I know it says that I need to do that, but it's okay that if I don't do that for 9 months because of a risk, and not to deny that there's a risk, but we still have to prove that it's okay to not do that. And I don't think we have reason to believe that God says, oh, okay, well, just stop doing the work of ministry. Stop carrying out these commandments I've given you. Stop doing all of these things. Again, that burden of proof is there, and I have not seen why it would be okay to not do what God has told us to do. Second is the matter of the fear of death. Fear has a reasonable place. Fear is why you put your seatbelt on. Fear is why you drive the speed limit. Fear is why you don't go over the yellow line and all of these things when you get in the car. But fear also shouldn't keep us from ever getting in the car. And so when we talk about all of in a unique situation like we've been in the last year, fear should help us take precautions. Fear should maybe dictate the way we do things, and maybe cause some changes. Fear should, an understanding of risk, and a healthy fear and healthy risk management. But on the other hand, it can't mean we just stop doing everything. And so it's about a view of church. As I said, some of this probably feels like it's outdated, but it is this big litmus test of how we feel about church and how we understand church. And if we think that church can be postponed or replaced in some instance by a 45-minute video or any of those things, without seeing our church family, without interacting with in certain ways, without fellowshipping with, is that a picture the Bible gives us? Is that even an option the Bible gives us? To be clear, I don't mean that we had that everyone needed to just continue on with a full assembly exactly the way things had always been. There are ways to adapt. There's ways to find a way. I mean, I heard of, or a friend told me that a few families gathered in lawn chairs spread out in their backyard last year. I know not everyone had the weather for that, but again, it's this idea of let's get creative and do what we can. Some congregations divided and said, here's an earlier and a later one, so that we can still get together in some sense, and it's not too many people in the room. We're able to spread out, whatever precautions they were trying to take, but finding a way. It doesn't have to always look exactly the same, but finding a way to carry these things out because they matter, because it's important to be together, because it's important to have everyone be a part of what the church is doing. In the meantime, the lesson to learn is get more connected. What this whole thing revealed is, leading up to March of 2020, the general widespread view of church was far too small, that really it wasn't that much of a change for most people to not go to the building. That's a problem. That really, to just stay home and do video as well, it's limited, but it covers it. That essentially replicates the church experience, give or take a thing or two. Well, if that's the case, well, we've got some work to do. And so get a bigger view of church. Get more connected with each other. Get to the point where fellowship and hospitality and prayer shared with our fellow Christians and spiritual relationships are really being pursued to the extent that, say something like this happens again, we really understand that we're losing something and something we can't afford to lose if we can't come together. And so it's just a thought and a recap of the whole thing in hindsight of maybe where things could have been done better, maybe where our understanding of church needs to grow and change, and our understanding of verses like Hebrews 10:25. And so, having said all that, I hope that brings some clarity. I know it's one of those things where everyone has an opinion on everything. Last year when I wrote that, it's okay to not gather, there's a lot of people mad, a lot of people saying yes and amen. And you write on the other side, and those things fully flip. We're all, it's no surprise to anyone that everyone is very, very passionate about these things because they affect all of us so greatly, about masks and vaccines and distancing and gathering and not gathering and everything that's happened. There's the whole gamut of opinions. What matters is, what has God commanded of us, and do we have a reason and a right to not do it? And if we don't do it, what are we going to do in the meantime? And really, what is the picture of church that God has given us? All of these questions are things that I really hope we wrestle with. I really hope that we think through and take a look at. And so that's going to be our episode for this week. As I said, we are back with a new season through the summer. We'll be here weekly. We've got Dr. Bob Turner from the Sunset International Bible Institute will be coming on to talk about leadership. We'll have John Rowe, a guy I've met through the whole Church Reset project. He'll be coming on to talk about evangelism, somebody that's had quite a bit of success with it, and I'll readily admit that is not my strong suit. So I'm excited to learn from him, get some ideas and some pointers from him and what he's learned. We'll have Brad Harrop will be joining us in a few weeks to talk about critical race theory, talk about some books on the matter that you might have heard about, and kind of where things stand and the challenge that this all presents to the church as we examine race and all of these things. So we've got some really exciting episodes. Make sure you've subscribed, spread the word if you get the chance about the Think Deeper podcast, and I will talk to you guys next week.